So, I want to talk about something serious tonight and Jews in the news, about President Trump's Gaza plan. And I want to focus, the source that I want to use for our discussion this evening is the email that Daniel Gordis sent out today. I don't know if I don't subscribe, but I do get an email from him every day, in Israel from the inside. So I highly recommend it. It's interesting understanding of what's going on in Israeli society from an American's perspective who had made Aliyah about 30 or so years ago. So he writes understanding what the American Jewish community is about and informing the American Jewish community what's going on in Israel. And we're going to look at a 2 minute, 2.5 minute video that he has with some discussion there, and then there's an article from the AP, Associated Press, their website about President Trump's Gaza plan. So I want to say, I thought about what I'm wearing and whether it's appropriate for a discussion like this. And I kind of alluded to it on Shabbat in my comments Shabbat morning. There's a lot of terrible things going on in the world around us, and we're inundated all the time. Um, Federal workers don't know if they're going to have a job. Do they take a buyout? Do they not take a buyout? A federal judge just halted the whole buyout plan. It's chaotic in the federal workforce, um, and it's the idea that ICE is going in and around different places around the country looking for illegal immigrants, potentially going into schools, into hospitals, places like that. We're going to have a full-fledged discussion about criminals who make it into the country or immigrants who have engaged in criminal activity and whether they should be deported or not. A discussion for another time. And I totally see the value of legitimacy of the argument of deporting people who are here illegally who have also engaged in criminal activity. I totally get that and understand the legitimacy of that argument. But there's that going on, and the idea that all those who were convicted and or on trial for January 6th 4 years ago, who were all pardoned, that's another unbelievable threat to democracy and threat to law enforcement. And then also the continuing war with Hamas and what's going on in Israel. So, and the unbelievable rise in anti-Semitism in this country and around the world. So, as an American, we feel the onslaught of the chaos of what's going on around us. As a Jewish American, we feel it, and as a Jewish American uh, who is strongly Zionist, it's just like just pile on all this stuff. So the Super Bowl was a good distraction. So for 3 hours or so, it's nice to forget about what's going on in the world around us, and sports serves as that distraction. And that's why I'm wearing the Philadelphia Eagles sweatshirt tonight. And I conducted a funeral today for George Kessler, may he rest in peace. Remember he in Maryland, who passed away 2 years ago. Active members of the synagogue coming to shul every Shabbat. And so I was just talking to somebody from the shul who was there before the funeral started, who just brought up some deep theological thing. And I said, my mind, I just can't handle that right now. I can talk about the Super Bowl. I can't talk about that. So it's hard. It's really hard to be able to focus on these things. Takes a lot of energy. Takes a lot. Just even if it was just one thing. Let's say the January 6th pardoning of all those criminals. If it was that takes a lot of energy to work to fight against those pardons and to stand up for supporting law enforcement and just laws in general in this country. That in and of itself would be a project that would take lots of organizing, lots of lots of advocacy. But there's tons of that right now, and it's just overload, overload for our system. So I see the Jews in the News sessions as an opportunity just to explore for 45 minutes one issue and for us to understand how deep and complicated this one issue is, and to have us realize then compounded upon that is all these other issues at the same time. So I want to share my screen with the Daniel Gordis piece that came up today. Okay, and so I apologize that there are like these ads on the side, and but I couldn't cut and paste this into because there's a video that I want to look at. So we're going to look at this video to just a second here. I'll have to. It'll work in a minute, but I just want to do the lead in for this video. One of the hostages released. Okay, we're going to talk about these pictures in a moment. One of the hostages releases Or Levy. Okay, that's the introduction here. Or Levy. And Or Levy attended the music festival where lots of people were killed by Hamas there and also taken hostage there. One of the things that became famous from the music festival is people running away and finding themselves in one of these bomb shelters, these freestanding bomb shelters. And like 30 people inside the bomb shelter. And famously, Hirsch Goldberg and a friend of his named Aner, who were, just released from the army or had some time off from the army, kind of helped calm people down inside that shelter. And when Hamas came to lob hand grenades into the shelter, Hirsch and Aner were throwing the hand grenades out. So maybe 10 hand grenades, they did that. So one, they were not able to get out, and Aner died in that shelter. And Hirsch was injured and was taken captive. Or Levy was also taken captive. And Aner's mother, there's a lengthy interview, and the 7.5 minute interview here was from. I'm not gonna play it now. Sorry, but I didn't want you to see, Nasrallah there, but just to understand, this is another video that's on here. These are Aner's parents, and this interview was done several months ago about who Aner was and what he did that day in saving all these people from in the shelter by throwing the hand grenades back out. So again, one of the people who was saved by Aner's actions was Or Levi, and Or Levi was released this past Shabbat. He was one of the three released. And so that's the background. And then there's this, this is Or Levi, his back is to us. And I'm going to see if I can get it back to the beginning of the tape. Yes, I can. Okay. So it's Hebrew spoken by Israelis is really fast, so try to follow along with the subtitles. This is Or being reunited with his family in the hospital.
כל הזמן אנחנו רואים אמא של ענר שפירא, גיבור ישראל. אני שמעתי מהלך הרעיונות, מהלך היום, שהם גם לא ידעו שהוא נהרג בסוף. לא, הוא ידע, הוא לא ידע הוא ידע שהוא נחטף ונראה איתו על אותה... יש על זה כל מיני גרסאות. במהלך היום שמענו, נדמה לי שגם אחד מהם, גם עוד מישהו מתוך המיגונית הצליח להחזיר עם נכון. אגב, לא בטוח בכלל, קודם כל אתה יודע שזה לא 8 רימונים, זה 10. יצא לי לצערי. 2 רימונים בינך לביני. ואני לא בטוח שמה שהרב את בסוף זה רימון. יכול להיות שזה היה טענה שזה היה RPG. אבל נגיד עכשיו שוב שבוע טוב לשירה שפירא.
So this is
when you've been away for a while,
just a
you want to
second.
be taken home by someone special. For those once-in-a-lifetime moments, we proudly introduce the Red Cross Ride Share app.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. It went to another video. Instead of stopping, I want to give me a moment or two to find it again, and I just wanted to explain that these two newscasters on Saturday night were interviewing Aner Shapiro's mother, and that's all I wanted to say. And for some reason, it went to another video from Daniel Gordis. And so I'm getting back to it. Just give me a moment here. No, that's not the one. Here we go. Okay. I tell you, I'm so unprofessional about this. So here we go. Now I can get back to it. Okay.
בזמן, אנחנו רואים אמא של ענר שפירא, גיבור ישראל. אני שמעתי מהלך הרעיונות, מהלך היום, שהם גם לא ידעו שהוא נהרג בסוף. לא, הוא ידע, הוא לא ידע הוא ידע שהוא נחטף ונראה איתו על אותה... יש על זה כל מיני גרסאות. במהלך היום שמענו, נדמה לי שגם אחד מהם, גם עוד מישהו מתוך המיגונית הצליח להחזיר עם נכון. אגב, לא בטוח בכלל, קודם כל אתה יודע שזה לא 8 רימונים, זה 10. יצא לי לצערי. 2 רימונים בינך לביני. ואני לא בטוח שמה שהרב את בסוף זה רימון. יכול להיות שזה היה טענה שזה היה RPG. אבל נגיד עכשיו שוב שבוע טוב לשירה שפירא.
שבוע טוב.
את רואה את התמונות של אור לוי, וזה ממש מישהו שהבן שלך במו ידיו הציל.
כן, אנחנו כל כך מתרגשים. קשה לי אפילו להסביר, אנחנו דתיים, אז ראינו את התמונות ממש עכשיו. במוצאי שבת, ואנחנו כל כך שמחים שהמלאכה הזאת שהנר התחיל עכשיו בזכות מדינת ישראל, בזכות קבלת ההחלטות, בזכות הצבא, בזכות, לא יודעת, בזכות כולם, סוף סוף התרחשה ואור לוי הגיע חי הביתה. ואנחנו רק מתפללים שיבואו גם 2 החטופים הנוספים מהמיגונית, אליה כהן ואלון אוהל. ואנחנו עצובים ונזכרים בהירש גולדבק פולין שלא הצלחנו להביא אותו חי. המדינה לא הצליחה להביא אותו חי. אבל אנחנו מחכים לכל החטופים ואנחנו מלאי התרגשות שהנר, כל הזמן אמרנו שיש 7 חיים בארץ ו4 חטופים. עכשיו היו 3 חטופים ועכשיו יש 2 חטופים וברוך השם אור בארץ. מאושרים.
שירה, אני שמעתי אותו היום אומר שהוא מאוד רוצה לפגוש אתכם. מה תגידי לו?
בחיבוק ענק, בהתרגשות, ברעד, כולנו נשמח מאוד 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 לפגוש אותו. ואת הבן שלו שדיברתי עם המשפחה שלו בתקופה הזו, וקיווינו והתפללנו, ובטח שנשמח לפגוש אותו איזו שאלה בכלל.
ובזכות הבן שלך, לבן שלו יש אבא.
ברוך השם.
והרעד הוא של כולנו. תודה רבה
התרגשות
שלה.
אדירה.
תודה רבה.
תודה.
שמע, מצד אחד זה מזעזע, ומצד שני, זאת גאווה להיות חלק מהעם הזה.
That's what Daniel Gorders pointed out, that the newscaster is saying, it makes me proud to be part of this people. So, just so that we're clear, the hostages were released like at 10 o'clock in the morning, Israel time, on Shabbat. Okay? Aner Shapira's parents were religious. You may have noticed that this newscaster here, the guy on the left, he's wearing a kippah. And so I don't know what time this news broadcast started, but clearly it was after Shabbat. So some people in Israel who are religious were not able to watch live the release of the hostages. So the rest of Israel who are not religious, who are watching it live, have watched these videos over and over and over again over the course of the day. And then religious people, once Shabbat is over, start watching the videos. Okay? So now, Aner Shapiro's mother is called by one of these news outlets in Israel to let her know that, or she knew, I think she did know already, that Or Levy is one of the people that her son heroically saved by throwing the hand grenades back out from the shelter. And they tell her that Or said that he would want to meet her to thank her for the valor of her son. And she says, of course, I would give him a big hug. So just think about that, the ability of a mother who knows that her son died. I'm not going to play the interview that they had with her and her husband about his heroism and how they really would have hoped that he wouldn't have been a hero and he would have just come home, and the whole idea of what it means to be a hero and all of that. What this is pointing out is the family of Israel, and that it didn't matter whether Aner, who was killed that day by one of the hand grenades, it didn't matter that whether he knew the people in the shelter or not. What mattered is that they were fellow Israelis, and they were being attacked by the enemy, by Hamas terrorists, these evil monsters. And his army training took over that day. His and Hirsch's army training took over that day, and they brought calm to the people in the shelter, and they acted heroically in a way that should make all of us proud and move to tears. And to say, a newscaster to say, makes me proud to be part of this people. So I want to read a little bit of what Daniel Gordis said about this. For those of us who didn't hear the news until after Shabbat, it was an intense Saturday night. The 3 additional hostages, it turned out, had been released. But as we'd all become accustomed to seeing their faces on hostage posters, the faces that we now saw when they actually left Hamas captivity were simply hard to believe. Comparisons like these flooded Israeli social media. So these are the pictures on posters, and some of these pictures we have in shul, and these are pictures that are around the world on social media. These are the 3. The top 3 are the 3 that were released, and the bottom 3 is what they looked like at the time of their release. So as President Herzog of Israel said, this is a crime against humanity, what the condition was. And if you've been reading Times of Israel, reports are slowly coming out as to how they were treated in captivity, tortured, hung upside down, burned, starved. It's just unspeakable. But it's enough to take a look at the difference between these people, how much they have aged, what they look like. The same image came to mind for everyone we spoke to. These men looked like Holocaust survivors. Israelis were in tears. Israelis called for revenge. And then most took a deep breath and said, let's get them all out first, then we'll get revenge. Whatever that looks like, whatever that's worth. Okay, so this is the, I'm not going to play this, but this is Aner Shapira, the one who saved Or Levy and the others in the shelter, and that's his girlfriend. His girlfriend is interviewed in this. So you can go to Israel from the Inside, and you can look on the website, and you can watch that interview another time. And his parents are there. He's the oldest of 7 children. So, and then it's just okay. Part of the shock and horror of the evening stemmed from the image and story of Eli Sharabi, seen here meeting up with his family for the first time. And I don't need to play that either because it's just, it's just a very moving kind of reunion. If you look carefully, none of the hospital staff touches any of the hostages until the hostages specifically request that they do. It's part of putting the now former hostages back in control. They determine who does and doesn't touch them and when. The weeping in the picture above is first because Eli Sharabi had been gone for so long because he's barely recognizable as the human being he was when he was stolen from his home. These two are the same person. And I can't imagine how even Eli Sharabi's mother could have recognized him. I mean, what in the face looks like your son? There is nothing. The ears here are close to the head. The ears here are sticking out. He's a roundish face, a narrow face, vibrant eyes, dead eyes. How does this look like the same person? And it's because it's up to those people hugging him to somehow break the news. This is the same man with his wife and 2 daughters, that his wife and 2 daughters, pictured below, were killed on October 7th. He had no idea. He had not heard any news at all from the outside ever since October 7th. And the first thing that he said to the IDF soldiers who received him from the Red Cross was that he was anxious to see his wife and kids. One can imagine the searing pain for even the soldiers who were told that under no circumstances were they to say anything about that. So imagine the ride in the Red Cross van or in the Army vehicle to take him to the helicopter, to take him to the hospital. Nobody's allowed to tell him that his wife and kids were killed on October 7th. It was painful and raging it was a painful and raging evening in which the joy we all felt that 3 families were reunited was hugely dented by the agony that these reunions heralded, by the horrifying condition these men are in, and by our wondering, since every week has gotten worse, what we're going to see next. Why do 70% of Israelis, and this is getting to our topic now, why do 70% of Israelis support Trump's pie in the sky plan to disperse the Palestinian people? Because 70% of Israelis believe that the Palestinians are hopelessly and irredeemably evil. So that's So I want to say a little bit about that. So President Trump's plan, if he thought about it ahead of time, was it spontaneous, spur of the moment? Did he actually think about this with advisors? To clear all of Gaza of its 2 million citizens is nothing short of ethnic cleansing. And we should be absolutely clear about that. It's ethnic cleansing. So we, of all people, as Jews, should be very sensitive to ethnic cleansing, because like I talked about with the teens in our school on Sunday, we have been victims of ethnic cleansing. That's what part one of the Holocaust was about, clearing areas under Nazi control of Jews, putting them in ghettos, and then shipping them out of the ghettos to concentration camps. So the Holocaust was none other than ethnic cleansing, which led to genocide. But in 1492, Spain was ethnically cleansed of its Jews, either by Jews forcibly leaving or forcibly converting to Christianity, which essentially ethnically cleanses Spain of Jews. And 300 years before, or 200 years before, England ethnically cleansed its island of Jews. So we should know firsthand what it means to be ethnically cleansed, and we should raise our eyebrows at least, which Prime Minister Netanyahu did not do when he heard President Trump announce this plan right there sitting next to him in the Oval Office. We need to be up in arms about ethnic cleansing and this plan. But the reason I began tonight with the whole video about Or Levy and the newscasters in Israel with Aner Shapira's mother is to help us understand that for Israel, this is personal. The war in Gaza is not just a war about the communities around the Gaza Strip that Hamas invaded, burned down, and killed and took captive. It's not like when school shootings take place in this country, and they don't happen here, but they happen in Florida or in Kentucky or in California, we say, it's not here, it's there. Israel doesn't say that. When anything happens in Israel, no matter where in Israel it happens to everybody. Now, it could be the nature of Israel being a small country, geographically and population, but it's also a part of what it means to be Jewish and what it means to be Israeli and Jewish. That I remember clearly an example of this. One time in Israel with my family, I'm holding my oldest daughter's hand. She might be 10, 11 years old at the time. And walking on the sidewalk. And maybe she's a little bit too close to the curb. Somebody in a car drives by and yells out, move away from the curb. Like, why is it your business to tell me how to walk with my daughter on the sidewalk? But that's what Israelis do. Your child is their child, which is why children in elementary school can take a city bus to go to school, go to the mall, and they know they got tons of fathers and mothers and uncles and aunts on the bus who are going to look out for them. So that's just the nature. I mean, I remember it when I lived in Israel and I was in 5th grade in 1972. It was a much smaller country then. Now there are 10 million people in Israel, but it's still the same way. It's still the same way. People in Israel care for each other. And everybody's business, somebody's business is everybody's business. So when Daniel Gorda says that 70% of Israelis favor Trump's plan because 70% of Israelis think Palestinians are terrorists, it's tragically sad. It is tragically sad. Before October 7th, so October 6th, 2023, there were still a minority, but still a vocal minority in Israel that was advocating a two-state solution and to negotiate with the Palestinian Authority and to make it happen. And Prime Minister Netanyahu, on purpose, formed a government, a far-right government, that would be totally opposed to any kind of negotiation like that, and would be in favor of ethnically cleansing Gaza and ethnically cleansing the West Bank. But before October 7th, nobody would imagine that those opinions on the right would have any legs to them. They were just people talking. But now, when all of Israel experienced October 7th, all of Israel experienced October 7th and is still experiencing it and is still living it every single day, and they see those pictures of the hostages from Shabbat who were released, the before and after pictures, we have no choice but to yell and scream and in frustration. How does the world not see that Hamas is monsters? Simple. Hamas is evil and they are monsters. How does the world not see that? How is it that the International Red Cross, since October 7th, has not attempted to find out the condition of the Israeli hostages, and not even the fact that there were non-Israelis who are held hostages, citizens of Thailand and Nepal, other foreign workers who came to Israel to work on those kibbutzim around the Gaza Strip? How is it that the International Red Cross did not care about that? How is it that the United Nations has not condemned in a strong way or continue to condemn the actions of Hamas? How they not condemn the way the Hamas has been releasing the hostages, to parade them on a stage. These weak, physically weak people are paraded on a stage, forced to dress like in quasi-uniform, and to be surrounded by masked gunmen. How is that permitted? And how is it that there is no outrage from anybody outside of Israel? So these things is what Israel thinks about, and what Israel has had to live with in its entire 76, 77-year history. Israel knows it's alone, and Israel is happy to have friends in other countries, but knows that those friends are fair weather friends. And so when President Trump says that Hamas is terrorists and that Gaza should be ethnically cleansed, a part of me says, it's only a part of me, it's not all of me. A part of me says, thank God for President Trump. And I can't believe that I've said that. And now it's recorded for posterity that I said that. But as a Jew who cares about Israel, have we had that kind of level of support? Even if it's just verbal so far? So you can understand, after just seeing Daniel Gordis's piece today, if you haven't seen other pieces from Daniel Gordis that adds to this, if you haven't been reading Times of Israel, that adds to this, it's continual about the condition of the hostages, what Israel has been putting up with, and the sound of crickets, of the silence from the world, United Nations and countries about Hamas. So it's aggravating, it's outrageous, it's morally repugnant that Israel has to fight this fight on its own. Now, I don't think ethnic cleansing is the way to go. I really don't. And the benefit of the doubt side of me says perhaps President Trump floated this outrageous plan to prompt other people to say, well, let's have a different plan instead. And as long as there is a plan that Israel would agree to about how Gaza would be rebuilt and how Hamas would not be allowed to have a foothold anymore or allowed to exist, if there's another plan that would work that's not ethnic cleansing, I think Israel would support it. But there's no other plan on the table now. Now, this afternoon, Hamas announced that it's delaying the release of more hostages, and that President Trump has said all the hostages need to be released. So we're at a crossroads now. Why is Hamas delaying? They're laying the blame, of course, on Israel, that Israel has violated some aspects of the ceasefire agreement, which is baloney. It's most likely that Hamas recognizes there are no other hostages alive, and they don't want coffins to be released. That's a possibility. I don't know. So we're at a crossroads right now of what to do, and it's a fraught time in Israel. And the problem for those of us who care about ethics and morality and religious values is that we're tested at a time like this when we see images like what we've been seeing about the hostages being released. It's one thing to objectively try to be ethical and moral in seeing the humanity in the other side, even the enemy. But when you see images like this and you know what the enemy does, makes it really, really hard to be objectively ethical and moral. And that's another thing that we can blame Hamas for. Not only did Hamas kill 1,200 Israelis that day, not only did they take 250 hostage, and not only did they kill over half of them and commit unspeakable acts of violence and horror and evil against Israel, but they also forced Israel to be less ethical and moral itself. And that's something that is also inexcusable. So, I don't know what will be of President Trump's Gaza plan. I don't know what kind of legitimate other plans are out there. I haven't heard anything like Arab countries saying, other than we reject President Trump's plan outright. I haven't heard them say, well, this is what we're offering instead. Nobody is corroborating what Israel and President Trump are saying, that Hamas are terrorists. No other country that has any power, European country or anything, is saying, well, this is what we need to do instead. So it's agonizing, and it's terrible to have to watch this unfold. Any questions, comments, thoughts? Yeah, Bob.
Not more of a comment, which is when he announced the plan, which caught, I know, everyone by surprise. I couldn't believe I saw it on TV.
Yeah.
The immediate response I heard was all these other countries, nobody wanted the Palestinians, which
Right.
brought to mind what happened to our people
Right.
in the 1930s in Europe trying to get out. Nobody,
Right. So there's a slight difference.
we weren't there.
We Jews were being forced out. So they were actively being forced out, and we had no place to go. These residents of Gaza aren't being actively forced out yet.
Yet.
Okay, so that's a difference. They're still there. So the question now is a proposal to deal with them is to get rid of them. And so ahead of time, trying to look for a place that would take them in. So I can understand why countries, Egypt and Jordan, are saying no. Jordan has already a ton of Palestinian refugees, well, so-called refugees, living in Jordan. So I think, if not a majority, close to half of the Jordanian population are Palestinians. Egypt, an incredibly poor country, to have to deal with housing more, I can understand why people wouldn't want to do it. And secondly, it would also mean that you're agreeing with President Trump's proposal of ethnic cleansing. So I can understand not wanting to do that. But then there's talk that President Trump is threatening Jordan and Egypt with holding back economic aid to force their hand. And so King Abdullah of Jordan is going to be visiting the White House this week to talk about it. So, but Saudi Arabia should step up. Qatar should step up. United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, these rich Arab countries should step up and say, this is what we're going to do. We know Hamas terrorism is a destabilizing force. We're opposed to Iran. We don't want the Iran proxies. So we need to take care of this and solve this problem so that the whole Middle East will be a stable force and we could be united against Iran. That was the idea of getting Saudi Arabia on board with normalizing relations with Israel to be a force against Iran. And that if Iran sees that countries in the Middle East are allied against it, that maybe that will keep Iran quiet. But nobody has stepped up to this plan that diplomats have thought makes sense. Thomas Friedman, Brett Stevens, other people, Dennis Ross, have written about this, but nobody is stepping up. So in the meantime, what are we supposed to do? So of all countries, Russia says we're not discounting President Trump's plan. And Turkey is opposed to it. Okay, who cares about Turkey? But Turkey is a major force in the Middle East. So anyway, it's complicated. I'm not an expert on these things. I just know it's very complicated, and it questions values, and but understanding that our values can change based on what's happening in our life. If we're under attack, values go out the window, and it's self-preservation. Any other thoughts, comments, questions?
Was out of the
Scylla.
box. I'm sorry, Scylla.
No, it's fine. I mean, it's not only that, how many years since our existence and our Arab brothers or neighbors, they were never there to help support Israel in its establishment or others. So it's not surprising to hear that they're not willing to take the Palestinians. It's always had to be the problem of Israel. So I am pleased to see that we're saying we need help with the Palestinian issue and even to clean up Gaza. You know, you're bringing back the Palestinians to live in their land. So what are they sitting on? Rubbled houses,
Right,
disease, famine, no, the health factors are null. And
right.
what I'm also surprised at is it's not just Israelis that get to see these hostages coming out looking the way they are, but the world sees it. And where are the world leaders to
That's the
say, this is horrific?
right.
This is, you don't have hostages and burn their feet and starve them and, torture them and mutilate them in the ways. And yes, it's true. The reason they're stopping for more hostages to come home is because it's bodies, not living anymore. And what is the world going to say to that? But yet the world stays silent.
Right.
And it's frustrating in our own country. We're not going to talk politics, but there are things happening that we have this sense always of we are out of control to do anything. Now, when you hear Gaza is going to be the next Riviera, it's a joke. But if you thought in 1967, 68, and 70 that Vietnam and Thailand was going to be a destination for a wedding one day, you would have also said to yourself, this is crazy. So I'm not saying Gaza is the next Riviera, but Gaza is a worthwhile territory because it's by the water. And we know the importance of economy near any kind of water
Yeah,
venue.
so there are other territories around the world, Hong Kong and Singapore, that are tightly packed and small and are wealthy. And Gaza Strip is about 20 miles long and maybe 2, 3 miles wide, something like that.
Mhm.
Maybe more than that, 5 miles wide, something like that. Anyway, so there's potential there, and that's the other frustrating piece is why look what Israel has done in 77 years in its territory, uh,
Right.
in order to be the startup nation and to be a first world country. Why is it that Arab countries have not been able to be first world countries themselves? What is it about Arab culture that is different than Jewish culture that prevents Arab countries from being first world countries? And that's the frustrating thing. And then when you have first world countries try to solve problems for non-first world countries, you're going to clash because first world countries assume that everybody agrees with first world country values, economic values, democratic values. And
Mhm.
countries that are not first world countries don't. They might aspire someday, but they're not first world countries for a reason. So it's possible if you invest and bring money in that maybe non-first world countries could become first world, but it's rare. It's rare. Just look at Africa and look what the below the Sahara countries in Africa and the condition of those countries now. Have they these former colonies of European countries are corrupt, impoverished, many of them civil war uh, going on. It's just terrible. So it's a clash of values that is a factor in trying to figure out how to solve the problem. So you have Jewish versus Muslim religious differences. You have Israeli versus Arab differences. You have democratic versus non-democratic differences. And it's just so there are some other issues that people can come around the table on. You have imminent destruction by nuclear war from Iran, that threat. And so maybe countries can unite against the threat of Iran. That could be a unifying factor, but it hasn't. It hasn't come to fruition yet. So these are just issues that Israel is facing, and understand Israel is still one of the happiest countries on earth. You know, they do these surveys of what are the happiest countries. Israel's always in the top 5, top 10, despite the fact that this war of Hamas has gone on, that Israel is under threat of terrorist bombings and attacks every day, and they have a nuclear weapon threat just 500 miles east of them in Iran. And yet the people of Israel are happy people. Go figure that.
How could you?
Yeah. So yeah. So
It's the world. It's the world
yeah.
as we live
Yeah.
it.
So we need yeah. So I guess just to summarize it again, the Israel's always alone. The Jewish people are alone. We maybe sometimes we can trust other people to be our friends, but really in the end, we really have to take care of ourselves. And how do we take care of ourselves while maintaining ethical, moral, and religious values? That's the
And
question.
I also want to remind everyone, when October 7th happened, everybody came to our community to be together because we should be grateful and we appreciate that we have each other. You
Right.
stood on the bima and you said, today the world is with us, but watch, within 2 to 3 weeks, the tide will shift. And it did, and it continued. So you did warn us back, not warn us, but you brought us to
It's
the
just
reality.
it's just I'm a student of history, so I know, our friends who can come out of the woodwork only for a short time. Well,
It's true,
yeah,
and it's true. And like I wish that even our own community would understand that it is so complicated. That word it's a hard word to digest. It is so complicated, the Middle East.
yeah,
You think you can have a solution, but you don't understand the depth that it runs into all of the Arab countries
yeah,
and the history.
yeah.
So it's
So,
complicated,
yeah.
truly.
Sylvia, you had your hand up, so you have to unmute yourself, and then I think we'll conclude with your.
On a lighter note,
Yeah,
maybe when Trump saves all this money from cutting down and cutting out agencies, et cetera, maybe we'll just offer every Gazan the money that we've saved, and they'll go on their own, and he'll have his Riviera. I'm
yeah.
I am trying to end this with a lighter heart because
No,
my
I understand, and
heart's broken.
I feel kind of badly. I understand the need to laugh about it, and there are Israel jokes about everything, and there are political cartoons in newspapers in Israel that you can't imagine. They're joking about these things, and I feel badly joking about it because really President Trump's plan is not something to joke about.
Right.
And it's just, and we of all people, the Jewish people, should be very, very sensitive to anything that is ethnic cleansing, and that we should not even. But I mean that's the point. When Daniel Gorda says that 70% of Israelis agree with it, it's out of frustration and anger and hurt that Israel has been dealing with. It's like post-traumatic syndrome that Israel's been dealing with since October 7th. And when you come up with a plan like that, your initial reaction when you've been under attack for 493 days, your initial reaction is, thank God for Trump. And then when you think of it, hopefully then people start thinking about it and realize, you know what? This isn't really who we are as a Jewish people. We need to come up with a way to solve this problem that respects the humanity of those Palestinians who are not terrorists. And we can only hope that it's the majority of the Palestinian population that they're not terrorists, and that there has to be some other way.
We must get rid of Hamas. Must.
Right.
Easier
All
said
right.
than done.
Easier said than done, and that's right. Right.
If I tell
All
you,
right, folks.
it is.
Let's
All right.
let's
Good evening.
have a good night, everybody, and to
Well,
be
everyone.
continued. To be continued.
Thanks for a good night. Thank you. Good night, everyone.